Hello, I'm Boris Pendergrass, and I'm excited that you're joining our podcast today. And I have a very special guest that I'm excited about, Craig Major. Craig Major is an IT professional. He's owned his own company. He's been a director for leading companies like Siebel, Oracle, and SAP. And I must confess, full disclosure, he was actually my director. Craig, welcome to the podcast today.
Well, Boris, thanks for having me. I'm really honored. I appreciate it.
So we're going to be talking today about leadership and performance and about preparing yourself and embracing change, managing your career, and being performed at a high level. So where I would like to start our conversation, Craig, is that you were instrumental in me getting one of my promotions to a manager position. And one of the key things where you were actually my director at my time. So there was a direct report between me and you. Mm-hmm. And I remember you encouraging and really saying, hey, make sure Boris is prepared. Told my manager that me and you went through some preparation. And I know in that preparation time, you were like, hey, Boris, you're going back for the second interview. You need to have kind of your 30, 60, 90-day plan. How are you going to come on board and lead the organization? So, I had a fantastic interview. I ended up getting the promotion. But in that interview, I interviewed with one of your directors, your counterparts. And I remember you sharing with me that the director said to you after my interview, wow, did you prepare Boris for the interview? And I remember the comment you said was, yes, of course. Didn't you prepare your guy? And I want to take it from there. I was just impressed and of course full of gratitude that you say, hey, I'm preparing Boris. But what I want to get into, that's a different approach to leadership. So let's take it there. Why did you do that? What was your approach to leadership at that time and now?
Well, Boris, this is one of those, you write the book, you make the movie, it's you've got that great voice. You could play me. That would be great. But it's something you learn over time. One of the things we've talked about before is, I came to the manager role pretty much the way everybody does. I was a really good individual contributor, and they said, this guy's really good at this. Let's put him in a job that he's not so good at and make him a manager. And like a lot of people, I floundered a little bit in the beginning, and I had to find a way of being not the player, but being the manager. And I have always differentiated administrative management and leadership. And I appreciate you pointing out, one of the instances where that leadership comes in, and that's, you want to see your people grow. When you're in a very large organization like Siebel, like Oracle, like SAP, a little too often, your own growth becomes the paramount.
Sure.
When in my estimation, growing the people that I have, I felt was best for me.
Sure.
And I know that that's not a common thought. It goes back to something very interesting I read from a master of marketing called David Ogilvy from Ogilvy and Mather.
Oh, yes.
Famous New York
very famous organization.
Famous. And I'm reading the stuff he writes, and a lot of it is business that. But one thing that really struck me was, if we are constantly hiring people smaller than ourselves,
sure,
we become an organization of midgets. But if we can hire people larger than ourselves, we will become a company of giants, because obviously there are so many more workers than there are managers. So if I get concerned about hiring and supporting and promoting somebody who's got skills equal to or better than mine, well, now I'm going to have an organization of small people. But that's never what I sought. I sought to have the organization of giants. And lo and behold, where I've been mostly retired now for 7 years, and I think 10 or 12 of the people that once worked for me are now vice presidents across the IT industry, and I really enjoy that, and I take a lot of pride in that. So
So I think what I'm hearing there, and I'm an athlete, right? The athletic background.
sure.
You want people that are good, that are better than you. You want people that'll grow you and your organization, and you're committed to do what it takes to grow them, to get them to learn.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it's having tougher conversations. Um, I recall having a conversation with a young guy, and I said, you have to communicate better,
Sure.
and um, I'd like you to take a business writing class, and that's a guy who's gone on to do some really great things, and but that was a tough conversation. It's tough to sit in front of another adult and tell them, look, you don't write well enough, you don't communicate well enough. But the next, this is pretty interesting. It's a line I actually learned from John Reinke, one of my managers, my vice president at Siebel and then at Oracle.
My vice president also going up. Yes.
Yeah, you bet. And so JR, JR was, one of the quintessential leaders. And he used to say, you have to tell people what they need to hear.
Sure.
And you can't worry about what they want to hear.
Yeah.
And so, sometimes it comes off as a little brusque. But hopefully it always came from a place of, I care about you being successful, and I care about getting the job done, and I care about excellence. And you still are in a sales organization. I care about the scoreboard.
Yeah.
Let's put those numbers on the board. Let's remove all doubt here.
So now, something you said, you brought up John Reinke, right? Your VP. This culture, this atmosphere, this team environment that you guys created, right, is, I think that was so impressive. Again, you were 2 levels above me. My manager was prepping me, and then I'm interacting with you in preparation. Tell me a little bit about that. Whether there's anything in the past that impacted that, and then just the thought process of, we're going to create this type of environment and culture.
Very interestingly, as I said before, I got to be a manager by being, maybe the best player on the team. When I got to Siebel Software, I was not the best player on the team. I was on, there were so many outstanding people in this organization. And when I ended up in the ESG group, the e-business solutions group, or because most of us were really large men, the joke extra sauce and gravy, because we
did eat well. We did eat well, team meeting.
Yes, we did. And that is absolutely a fact. So, but when I was in this group, not only was I not the best player, I worked my butt off just to feel like I belonged there, because they were, the Charles McGinnises of the world, the Philip Hases of the world, the Yogesh Sharma, John Reinke, Andy Mitchell. These guys, they're stunningly smart. Eileen Smith, stunningly smart people. And I worked hard every day just to feel like I belonged there. And I think that's the culture that John created. And it just so fit my soul that it remains today the best working time of my life.
Yeah. So, our topic, right, of the podcast is embracing change and, preparing on that path to success.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that, was just so impactful is, here I am on a team with a director who says, hey, I want to make sure you're prepared for success. And that wasn't happening on other teams. One of the things we talked about in prepping for this is, I wasn't always on your team. I joined Siebel and I was on another team. And I remember in a 12 to 18 month time frame, we went through 2 layoffs, reductions in force. Now, I was safe. I was a top performer. just committed to doing whatever it takes to succeed. And I did not get laid off. But I realized your team, that ESG team, did not lose anybody. And I said, wow, that's impressive. I need to get on that team. And I guess I like to segue into a conversation that as we're embracing change, as we're preparing for our own success, looking and being in an environment that's conducive, that's supportive and encouraging. You shared a story before where you were in an environment where, or working for a manager where he allowed you to learn and wanted you to learn and grow. Share a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was, probably my first great manager, and his name was Ed, and just a fantastic guy. And he wanted you to learn, and he wanted you. His idea was, I give you this fundamental training, and then I want your initiative and your creativity and your skills to take this job and make it into whatever your skills allow it to be. I don't need it. I don't need to come to work every day with "I am the boss" tattooed on my forehead. I'm here to lead, and I can lead from in front, or you can get so good at this that I lead from behind. But he wanted you to learn. And a counterbalance was, he had a peer who felt completely differently. And certainly, the peer and I did not, we didn't get along because, I really embraced the idea of learning a lot and getting ahead and being this. And he embraced the idea that he was above me and that was the way it was going to stay. And, over the course of time, I grew a great deal. And, I honestly, I have no idea where his career went because I don't have anything to do with him. I mean, I don't hate him or anything. It's just, he was not interested in my success. And that was the first, small stone in the foundation that, all those years later said, the conversation with me and Rick, your manager, Rick, and a marvelous guy, and said, here's what we think they're looking for. Here's what the culture of Oracle looks like. And this is what the next generation of managers this is where they're going to come from and what they have to offer. And just made sure. And a coach's job is to make sure your best habits are at the forefront of your thinking. Obviously, you ran the race, you were swift of foot. I could not run the race for you, but I could remind you, to keep your weight over your knees. I could remind you not to pop up upright, but, to drive. I could remind you of those things and just make sure that when you're ready, you've got your best habits at the front of your thinking.
Sure.
And, just before we started, you had a great reminiscence about going through your strategy and what your 30-day plan was going to be and what your 60-day plan was going to be and what your 90-day plan was going to be, should you be put in charge of one of these teams. And obviously, well, first, you got the job. I don't know if we said that part.
Yes.
You did get the job. But beyond getting the job, the people who interviewed you were blown away.
And I got the job. My team, we actually hit our number. A bunch of us all went to Performance Club, and I one or two of my people actually, I think, got promoted or lateraled into a desirable position. And then that kind of gets back to what you said, and something I believe is, we as leaders have a responsibility to the people on our team, right? We are accountable to them just as they're accountable to us, and we're all accountable to our organization. So, not only are, they're working on their goals to deliver for the company, but we want to understand, hey, what are your goals? How can I help you? And that may mean, hey, you're going to get promoted above me. That may mean you're going to grow your skills and leave somewhere else. But while we're working together, we'll be successful, we'll accomplish our goal, we'll make a lot of money, and then we'll be able to say, hey, we've helped each other so that whenever we part, there's still a relationship there where we can communicate with each other's and in our business, you maybe even leverage that in the future work environment. So just a little bit of that responsibility. I remember you sharing something about the people you've laid off and remember their names and
Sure.
that accountability for people's income and providing for their household. Share a little bit about that thought process.
Sure. It's one of the things that we talked about was as a leader, I felt responsible for the livelihoods of the people who worked for me. And that's a burden. And I hope to think I shouldered it well, but it was a burden. Having to let go of somebody for cause never really bothered me. It's like,
And by cause, you mean they're not performing,
right.
they're not doing the work, they don't have the ability. Is that what you mean by cause?
For cause means, you've seen it 1,000 times. People fire themselves.
Yes, exactly.
I'm just the guy who calls them to tell them you succeeded. You've been trying hard to get yourself fired, and congratulations, you won. You won the exit to the door, and that, I feel like when you let go of somebody who deserves it, you are telling the rest of the organization you love them.
Sure.
I love you because I will not tolerate this non-performer in your midst. And
You won't be responsible for doing his job. I won't be responsible for doing his job. We're not going to let that one person drag down the performance of the whole team.
Correct. I have such a great story about that many, many years ago, maybe back in the 80s. I was a manager of a tech team in a small company, and I was on vacation with my wife, and I was reading a book called How to Swim with the Sharks Without Being Eaten Alive. I was in that young manager phase of reading all the business books, and so I'm reading this, and I turn a page, and the if you ever see the book, it's very catchy, but the chapter headings are almost paragraphs. And this one says, it's not the people you fire who make your life miserable. It's the people you don't.
Mm.
And the next line was, when I say that at a seminar, this is the author talking now. When I say that at a seminar, I get more amens than a Billy Graham revival. And in that instance, I put the bookmark in the book, and I closed the book and dove in the pool. And in that instant, that young man lost his job.
Yeah.
And he just had to wait until I flew home to New Jersey to tell him. And first day I walked in and I called him in and I said, you are about to begin your journey somewhere else. We'll have your check ready in a couple of minutes and you're out of here. And, and he was really very good at the job. He just felt entitled to be late and entitled to be sloppy and entitled to be occasionally unkind to his fellow worker. And there, there's no level of skill that's going to say you get to be mean to everybody else. And
that's back to, because I'm creating this culture, this environment, this team environment where we're working together, supporting and encouraging each other.
Absolutely.
And if that is the environment, then hey, we can't have that.
Absolutely.
But I'm also
that. I'm sorry. 9 months after that, he called to take me out to lunch to thank me.
Mm.
And he said, I've always been really good at what I do, and people put up with a lot of nonsense from me. And, I really think I grew up the day you let me go. And so, but I remember everybody that I had to let go. And if we got to lay them off because we're doing a bad job running the company,
right,
that kills me.
Right.
I remember all of them.
That is so good. That is so good. Well, and just a segue back to what you were saying. I know I've had to let people go for not performing. And even in that, we assess where they are. We're monitoring that. We're pointing out the flaws, the area where they need to grow. We're providing help. We're providing instruction. This is the how-to. And if they can't do or don't do all of that, we're doing everything we can to equip them.
Sure.
And just not a fit, or they're not willing to do what's necessary.
Sure. And when you got to let somebody go, you have to admit you're part of the failure.
Mhm.
Now, we started this by me saying, probably a little Weisenheimer-ish a little, but people fire themselves because basically they do. But we did hire them.
Yeah,
We had the chance to enculturate them.
sure.
We had a chance to bring our culture to them and see, this is how we want our team to go. These are, and I don't know if you remember or not, but I have a standard speech that I give to everybody. And it's, here's my job. And, number one, it is my job to make sure that you understand your mission. What are we trying to do here? What is your part in that? And what do I expect from you? That's my job, to make sure that that's clear for you. The second thing is my job is to make sure you have the tools you need to do your job. You need a phone, you get a phone. You need a laptop, you get a laptop. You need some training, you get some training. So what do you need to execute the mission? And third, while you are pursuing the mission, you have my unconditional support. Now there are organizations, I don't care to name any, Oracle, where sometimes throwing another guy under the bus was a normal part of the business, and I will not tolerate that.
Good.
If you're working on my team and you're going after the mission and something goes wrong, well, I got your back, Jack. And that's just those. So those are the three things that I would tell every new person who came to work for me in the last 25 years.
So, as we're coming to the end of this, just from a wrap up, again, we started this because the leadership, the culture, the environment that you set for our team, the support for our individual education and growth. I think what I would say and like to hear your feedback is we both have children who are adults, who are professionals in the work environment, and as they're on their path to success in their career growth, I think these are some of the things they should look for when they're saying, hey, is this a culture where I can grow? Is this a team where I can grow? Is this, leadership that is going to grow me? I guess what would your instructions
it's a great conversation to have. Yeah, it's a great conversation to have. One of the roles that I have is I'm the chapter advisor for my college fraternity, and in the beginning of every school year, I go and I tell them, here's what's important to me. Number one is I want you to be good men. Be good men. When you're out wearing your letters out there on campus, I want people to see a good man and to think well of our organization. I want you to be a good steward to our brotherhood. It's my time was nearly 50 years ago, and their time is today, and I respect that it's their time, but it's also my brotherhood. So be a good steward, and for the good people who come after you. And you're in college for a reason. Do your work, get your grades, and get ready for that life thereafter, and take care of business. So that's the important thing. We talked several times about change, and one of the true facts of life is the only true constant in life is change.
Yes.
It's inevitable. There's a great line. I don't know if you remember, but when we had that big organizational shift at Siebel, where we were going to start taking a really hard look at the resources we were expending on sales. We weren't going to try to cut back on the number of demos and the number of people in the field. The old Siebel bus joke. We'd like to have a meeting where there are more customers than Siebel people. And it was going to be a pretty dramatic change. And in introducing that change at a training session, I used a quote from Machiavelli, from The Prince by Machiavelli, that nothing is more fraught with peril than change, because it brings with it the enmity of everybody who benefited from the old, while only gaining the lukewarm support of those who may benefit from the new. And it was true in 1500s when he wrote it, and it's true today. When you're trying to change, when you're trying to be a dynamic agent of change, you're going to have to overcome a lot of resistance. And then if you have the right leadership and you create that culture and you create that trust, people are going to say, okay, even if I'm not sure, this is a group that if I have to make that change, I want to go with them.
Well, hey, I thank you for this. It was an awesome conversation. I know this is going to be impactful to our podcast guests. Thank you for joining podcast guests. And Craig, thank you for being an awesome leader, and thank you for sharing that leadership thought process with us today.
Well, thank you, Boris. I was honored to be asked.
Have a great day, everybody.